Here we got a Buick V6, something a little different. This is a core I have in stock that I'm gonna build sooner or later. So far it's been later. I've had this fucking thing for decades and it's just been sitting on a stand. This is a pretty rare engine actually. It's a 1982 4.1 Buick V6. They only made these from 80 to 84. And in factory trim, they had a 4-barrel, a Quadrajet. It's the only way you could get them. This one's obviously turbocharged. The heads and intake are from an 85 Buick Grand National. And the block is an 82 4.1 from I think it was a Riviera. Might have been a Tornado, but it was one of them. These little bastards will take a lot of power. The 4.1 and the 3.8, they look pretty much the same. They use the same front cover and shit. Use the same crank. Use the same type rods. But the 4.1 came with the turbo 3.8 crank and rods, which were a little beefier than the regular 3.8 crank and rods. And then they had a bigger bore. The 3.8 was a 3.800 bore. And the 4.1 is a 3.965. So you bore these 35 over, you got a 4-inch bore. Same as a 350 small block Chevy. That's the hot ticket, but pistons are expensive. You're gonna have to go with a Wiseco or a JE or something. These little engines can make some power. They're pretty durable. Decent heads on them. They benefit from bowl blend and put bigger valves in them. We have tiny chambers. I forgot what the CCs are, but it's around 48 or so. I think you zero deck one of these with flat top pistons and these heads, you get about 14-to-1 compression. So they run a big dish piston to get the compression down. In stock form, they were 8-to-1, which ain't worth a damn, but what they were stock ain't what they gotta stay. Stock is just a starting point. But there's been a lot of people build these up over the years, get big power out of them. There's a lot of aftermarket parts available. And I've had this thing for a long fucking time. Shit's changed over the years, so what I originally intended on doing with it and what I want to do with it now has evolved. Which now, I've seen a pair of aluminum stage 2 Buick heads, like from the 80s. They're like the Indy car type shit. get the bare heads for $1,500. That's not bad. Those heads costed a fortune back in the day. Then you can get a single plane stage 2 intake manifold with a 4150 flange. I've seen one of them for $400 used. But it's a big, gnarly looking single plane intake. Pretty tall. Use a holly on them. But I'm thinking about going with a blow-through carburetor. Run like a GT45 or something turbo with a blow-through setup on a single plane intake. Or run like a big, huge ass throttle body. Big flying toilet or something. But I'm going to do something different. I had an 86 T-type back in the day. It was intercooled and shit. 86, 87, they were intercooled. They had a little more power. This is the 84, 85 type setup, which they did pretty good. You could turn the boost up on them. There's a whole list of modifications you could do to these things to get more power out of them. Those are the Grand National valve covers. Pretty rare, aluminum, hard to find. It's a pretty rare intake. It's a factory single plane turbo intake. Electronic fuel injection. Early shit. That's an old Garrett turbo. Little unit. There's the tag. How well that can be seen. They're pretty compact little engines. Be a good swap into like a BUICK Skyhawk or a Chevette or something. Whatever the Buick version of the Chevette was. But they also go into G-bodies pretty easy. Turbocharged BUICK V6 and a G-body. Pretty spirited ride. But these are hard to find. They made a shitload of 3.8s back in the day. But they didn't make very many of these 4.1s. So it's like a little insider secret here. They about 10% more flow compared to a 3.8, which more power, which in factory form these were rated at like 125 horse at 4 grand and 205 pounds of torque at like 2 grand. So they were a low RPM torque monster. And you go put a lot of boost to them and put a cam and shit in it. Head work. Free flowing exhaust. They make pretty good power. And they're light. They get the weight off the nose and the center of gravity pulled back since they're shorter. It's almost like setting the engine back half a foot. So you get better weight transfer and shit. But there it is, the Buick 4.1 V6. Pretty good unit.